I'm gonna make a bet, alright? I feel like, I have no reason to feel this, but I feel like this is the year that Mother will return to us. And that isn't to say my mother ran away when I was young, I'm talking about the franchise. I think we'll get a remake of Earthbound this year. I think it's releasing in October. And if nothing that I said is true, if we do not get the remake, if it does not release in October, then I will have to just roll around on the grass for an intro of a video. Okay? Hey everyone, John here! And the Nintendo Switch successor will officially be backwards compatible. And for those with a mega library like me, that's a huge deal, especially on the legacy side when we've got games like Doom, or Devil May Cry, or Resident Evil 4, or Crysis, or Bioshock. The list just goes on and on and on. And starting that again from scratch would be disastrous. So not only is the new stuff great, the legacy stuff's great, but one thing that I'm thinking about is the inherent performance boost. Because the Switch, as great as it is, you take the Joy-Con off, and you're left with a measly tablet, right? This is what the Switch is. It is a tablet with 2015-era chips inside. It's very impressive for what it is, but this is what it is. This is the extent of what the Switch can be. So of course, it is power limited. Now, when it comes to games that have poor image quality in the first place, like let's look at Xenoblade Chronicles 2, for instance, this game can be quite blurry at times. Inherent stronger hardware will not fix that. What this needs to be fixed is a Switch 2 specific patch, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in games that you just shove into your Switch 2 and you'll get faster load times, you'll get smoother frame rates, games with dynamic resolutions will scale less. That's what I want to look at right now, games that won't need patches but will just benefit from stronger hardware. Like Pokémon Violet, for instance. There's a lot of stuff that stronger hardware will not fix. I don't think that it's going to fix NPCs walking at a lower frame rate in the distance, but I do think it's going to fix just the general frame rate, the general resolution. I think you can probably fast travel quicker. That's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in today, the overall stability. So without further ado, let's look at a bunch of Switch games that I think will benefit from just being shoved in a Switch 2 and nothing more being done. There was a rumor a while back at last year's Gamescom that Breath of the Wild was being demoed behind closed doors on Switch 2 level hardware, and the point of this demo wasn't just to demonstrate the game at 4K 60 FPS, but also to demonstrate the lack of load times, just being able to go from the title screen to gameplay in an instant without a transition. And one game that I've always felt has awful load times is a very popular game, one of the biggest on the system, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Just booting this game up takes this long, and that's just to get to the title screen, because it loads again after that. And once you're in gameplay, for the most part, just roaming around the town, it's absolutely fine. But the moment you go in a building, you get another load screen. And like, let's say you go around the museum, you get a load screen to go in, you get a load screen to go down the stairs, you get a load screen to go to the next part, you get another load screen to get to the next part, and let's say people come over. Whenever someone comes to your island, it loads the entire island for them. So you basically get the same load screen that you got when booting the game up again every time someone joins your island. And let's say you want to go around the museum together. You have to load with each segment. And let's say you're in the museum and they're outside and they say, okay, come to me. You gotta go, okay, I'll be there in just a second. Just bear with me. Let me just edit out the load screens a moment and show you how nice it would be to roam around this game without constant loading. Look at this. It's lovely, isn't it? And this is greatly achievable. We could have this on the Switch 2 just by shoving in our Animal Crossing New Horizons cartridge and playing on that hardware. Nothing else. This is greatly achievable and possible. Now, New Horizons is locked at 30 FPS, so just shoving this in a Switch 2 will not make it 60 FPS. This game needs a patch for that. So let's look at a game that aims for 60 but never hits 60. This is Neo The World Ends With You, which has both a dynamic resolution and a dynamic frame rate. So it aims for 60 FPS, but usually it's around like 36 FPS. I don't know why they didn't lock it at 30, but good news for the Switch 2, I suppose, because this hardware will very likely force this game to hit 60. And it is still an absolutely fantastic game on the standard Switch, but you can feel it's pushing a bit too far ahead, and I can't wait to try this on a more powerful machine. Now, let's look at Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, a very smooth and stable game, right? Yeah, it's 1080p all the time, 60 FPS pretty much all the time. There's nothing really wrong with this game. There's a slightly long load to boot the game, but other than that, there's no real issues. Apart from one thing that's always bugged me. So when you start Smash Bros. Ultimate, and you go into the character select screen, and you try changing your costume, this happens. The game needs a few seconds to just load everything in, to actually load the other costumes and what they look like for every character. Once a few seconds is up, it's fine. You can just start switching. That's cool. You can play. Cool. You can see what you're doing. That's great. But it always takes a few seconds to load the palette swaps, and that's the one thing that I want fixed on new hardware. And I reckon it will. Very quick and easy one. But anyway, here is Bayonetta 3. And this series has a funny history, because the original PlayStation 3 and 360 versions, especially PS3, were very inconsistent. And then in came the Wii U versions, which were better. Like Bayonetta 1 runs better on Wii U, Bayonetta 2 runs pretty well, but kind of inconsistent on Wii U. And then the Switch came along, where it hits 60 FPS most of the time in Bayonetta 2. Not all the time, but most of the time. More than Wii U did. And then Bayonetta 3 comes along, where it really does not hit 60 FPS. Ever, really. It's actually a very unstable game. Bayonetta is always incredibly ambitious, always pushing the limits of what can be done on screen. But the hardware it's had has never been able to house this to a great extent. And so, shoving all of these games, Bayonetta 1, Bayonetta 2, Bayonetta 3, shoving them all on the Switch 2, should iron everything out, suddenly this trilogy should be 60 FPS across the board. It can finally be free from its curse. Speaking of curse, here is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom. This runs on Grezzo's own internal engine, and both of them have the exact same issues, though Echoes of Wisdom is a bit more extreme than Link's Awakening. It is a data streaming VSync issue. When you make your way around the world, when the game needs to load more stuff in, it will just go down from 60 FPS to 30 FPS. And it's quite jarring, especially in Link's Awakening, where it holds 60 a lot more of the time, so going down to 30 is a lot more noticeable. But in Echoes of Wisdom, I suppose it's not as noticeable because the game is never really hitting 60. It's always like around the 40s and 30s range. So just shoving both of these games on the Switch 2 should hopefully keep them locked at 60 the majority of the time, if not all the time. These also both have dynamic resolution scaling, so it'd be nice to have these both at their maximum resolution while holding the maximum frame rate. And let's stick with Zelda for a little bit longer. We've got Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which, for the most part, run really well for what they are. I don't think you can rationally expect more out of these games on Switch-level hardware. But still, there are frame rate drops in certain areas, and in Tears of the Kingdom, it's a lot more common, especially when using the Ultra Hand. And so just shoving these both on the Switch 2 should make them run hopefully locked at 30 all the time, and these are also prime candidates for a Switch 2 specific patch, so they may even run at 4K 60 FPS. And while loading isn't so much of a thing in this game once you're past the title screens, you still fast travel quite regularly, so being able to just go like, I want to go over here, and then in a snap of your fingers you're over there without a transition would be masterful. Although you wouldn't see the little animations of the divine beasts. Is it worth it to lose that? And one more Zelda game, we've got Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. When this game came out, back in 2020, a lot of people said, I'll just hold on for the Switch Pro. That was 4 years ago. 4 years ago, and there's no Pro. We're only now kind of getting the successor, which will be 5 years on from this game.
Age of Calamity does an incredible job recapturing the art style of Breath of the Wild. This is a really pretty game, and it's impressive that it holds that beauty while having so many characters on screen, but it comes at a cost, and that is performance. The game is pretty much always chugging. Even when it's fairly smooth, it's somehow chugging. And more than any Nintendo-published game, this would probably benefit the most, especially there's a Switch 2 patch giving it 60 FPS because, unlike a lot of other Warriors games, there's no toggle. It's either 30 FPS or nothing, and if you're playing in split screen, then you're essentially getting a split frame rate. Look how bad this is. But regardless of whether there's a Switch 2 patch or not, it'll just be nice playing this at locked 30 FPS, especially in multiplayer. And let's look at Mario a second. Now, the core Mario games pretty much always perform great, like a locked 30 FPS or a locked 60 FPS. And for the most part, that is true on the Switch. Mario Odyssey is a very stable game. There's a few frame rate dips in New Donk City, but for the most part, Odyssey runs fantastically at 60 FPS and looks amazing while doing so. But Bowser's Fury is more of an exception. This game doesn't really perform that well at all, especially in handheld mode where it's locked at 30 FPS rather than 60, which is very jarring to go from one to the other. Hopefully this game does get a Switch 2 specific patch so handheld mode can properly run as it's intended to, but even if it doesn't get a Switch 2 patch, playing this docked at a locked 60 without any dynamic resolution scaling would be wonderful. This is legit one of my favorite 3D Marios. Clearly performance didn't ruin my impression, but I'd still love to experience it in all its clarity without losing all those frames. And let's look at a game for me, and maybe a few other people. It's Dragon Quest Builders 2, one of the best games of this entire generation, no hyperbole, it's fantastic. It's also on PlayStation and Xbox, and it runs great there too, but I feel like it's at home on the Switch, like this is a Switch game, and it's a fantastic single-player adventure. But when you dive into the multiplayer component, things don't hold up so well. People make some very ambitious islands, and running them on Switch looks a little bit like this, and that is to say, the Switch is barely holding up. It really is only an issue if someone's gone overboard creating a fantastic island, but why should they be punished for making a fantastic island with this performance? And why can't I visit them without it, just running like this? Also, there's a pretty long loading screen between booting the game and getting to the title screen, which is odd, because Builders 1 was like this, in an instant, whereas Builders 2 is like, I've got to take my breath for a minute. I hope that's fixed. And now the game we talked about at the beginning. It is Pokémon Violet. And for the most part, I think most Pokémon games won't really benefit from Switch 2. They're just chucking in Let's Go Eevee, or Pokémon Sword, or Legends Arceus. Not much will change. There are frame rate drops within Legends Arceus, but it's not actually that drastic. Those games, for what they are, they have a bunch of tech problems, but performance isn't really the issue with them. Pokémon Violet, though, would absolutely benefit. We are still going to get a pretty ugly world, but those moments where the game actually slows down from dropped frames, those will hopefully be alleviated. And yes, we are still going to have problems like the camera clipping through the ground and low-resolution textures and mountains that look like... I don't even know what this looks like. And there is a chance there's going to be a Switch 2 specific patch, that's always a possibility, but I don't know how much they can fix without just remaking everything, redoing all the assets, changing the engine even. I think Violet and Scarlet are kind of just cursed to their technology. I'm not saying Switch technology, I'm saying the engine technology. I don't think Switch 2 is going to fix a whole lot more other than making the resolution and frame rate more stable. But still, that's a minor win. But who knows, maybe they'll go above and beyond and make this somehow a beautiful game. And let's end off with the newest game on this list. In fact, it came out today. It's Mario and Luigi Brothership. And unfortunately, this game has a bunch of tech problems. It's very fun, very imaginative, just playing this game makes me happy. However, it runs awfully. There's moments just exploring the world where it starts skipping around. And I wish that stuff wasn't there. It's fine for combat, it's not going to ruin your gameplay. It's just distracting. The resolution could be better too, but the main problem for me isn't the resolution and frame rate. It's that every time you go from overworld to battle, there's a load screen. RPGs are at their best when they're snappy, when you can just go to an encounter and just quickly get through it and go back to the overworld. But it kind of makes you want to avoid any battles, because there's always downtime between them, and I really hope that is ironed out on new hardware.
I'm sure there's a bunch of games that will really benefit from the extra power, but these are the ones that came to mind. Now, of course, this isn't just what we should expect. I expect there will be a bunch of actual Switch 2 specific patches for games like Mario Odyssey and Tears of the Kingdom that will probably push them to 4K or around that era, maybe even 60 FPS in some games. But not every game is going to get that. It's unrealistic to expect every single game, especially on the third-party side, to get a Switch 2 specific patch. But hopefully, every game benefits in some shape or form. Games like Splatoon 2 and 3 have dynamic resolutions, going from 1080p all the way down to around 720p. Same for Mario Odyssey. And just running those on Switch 2 should keep them at 1080p, hopefully all the time. And that's just going to be great for that overall stability of the image and what you can expect out of it. But who knows? Who knows exactly what we're going to get? This is just assuming based on how other consoles behave. But thank you so much for watching. And I talked about this a little bit at the start, but legacy games, that's something that I am more anticipating backwards compatibility for than just, the Switch-specific stuff. Because as great as it is to play Switch games on the Switch 2, a Switch is always going to be within grasp for me. But the thing is this system culminated so many great legacy titles. There's like a whole library of Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 games on the Switch, a bunch of PlayStation 2 ports, a bunch of PS1 ports. Basically a lot of stuff that never entered the Nintendo realm before came on with the Switch, and to start that stuff again would be awful. Not even to mention NSO with all its libraries. Imagine starting with NES games again. It's so cool that all this is just going to carry over, and we can keep building rather than building from scratch. So thank you for watching all the way until the end. I love you all, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye. No more rolling on the grass for me.